background in consulting and working within software development organizations. And so I have seen this a lot within operations and in my experience, and certainly have encountered it as, consulting with other companies. So we felt that this was very appropriate and would give everybody kind of a takeaway that they could actually implement and consider within their own environments. So we're going to be talking about Toil. We're going to be kind of talking about the politics of how companies measure work and what that kind of means, especially when you're in the heat of the moment. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how that can be changed a little bit and how you can actually have a real impact within your organization and in the productivity of what you're doing day to day. So let's get started. So meet Reshma. Reshma is a newly hired IT operations manager that was hired by Nsx Corp to help IT operations become more responsive to the business. Reshma was hired specifically because she had a background with software companies, was well-versed in DevOps, lean systems thinking, but the organization that she was coming into was just kind of starting that journey into DevOps. In fact, Nsx CIO had been kind of publicly promoting her hire, that she was hired as a major step towards implementing DevOps. And this was promised to solve a lot of the issues that IT was experiencing and the complaints from the business, their internal customers, because they were kind of unsatisfied with responsiveness with the IT organization. And you can see some of the examples there. So Reshma started out trying to understand the characteristics of Nsx IT environment, because every IT environment is unique. It's a unique blend of culture, processes, technologies, what you're trying to do. Every IT organization is unique. All the infrastructure, the technologies that are developed are unique to that environment. And this particular environment seemed pretty stressful. There were a lot of constraints at the organizational level. There were a lot of constraints with the technology, some of the legacy systems versus kind of the new user experiences that they were developing and trying to create, and as well as the processes that they were using to deliver on these technologies. And the one that Reshma was particularly focused on was the operations team, because they were in real pain. And they also seemed to be catching kind of a lot of the blame, or at least inferred that they were, the reason for some of these issues that, in non-responsiveness to the business. Reshma had learned through her experiences that if you really want to see the maturity of a software organization or a software company, operations is one of the best indicators of health of that organization. Operations is the culmination of change, of all of the changes that come with software and infrastructure and processes and all these things. They really kind of all come together in that group, and at that point when you're releasing software or making changes to anything.
And that's a really good point, Tracy. It's a good point to remember that ops, that day two space, that's where your code is running. That's where your customers are. That's the place where you're making money. That's where ops is. So
absolutely.
That's a great point.
That's where the cracks can first be seen, when there are cracks happening. So as you can imagine, Nsx IT operations were dealing with a lot of incidents, and they were constantly trying to dig out of a pile of never-ending issue requests. So Reshma decided to talk to the business to get their point of view on this. She met with several of the business side management and directors, some of whom had been vocally critical of IT in general. In particular, they were focused on long resolution times and having to wait for routine requests. And the justification for these complaints quickly turned to metrics, specifically the issue tracking metrics. Every month, there was a meeting with all of the managers on the business side and a few representatives from IT, where they would go through all of their open issues and review what they had as a digital dashboard.
Wait, so you're telling me an organization would notice that things were going slowly, so they would have more meetings, slow down, and look at the slowness? I can't believe you. No organization would do that, would they?
Never, never. This never happens in real life.
Sarcasm.
Yeah, so they would review this digital dashboard, and some of the metrics they would look at is, new versus closed issues, the priorities, incidents versus problems. The initial response time was particularly critical, how quickly they were responding, as well as the incident resolution time versus the SLA. Here's when you have to have these things done metric. Nothing on this digital dashboard gave any indication of applications or infrastructure time, health, or the team health, work in progress. SLAs were being reviewed, but there were no SLOs. There were no objectives. There was just kind of this ironclad contract. And the business didn't seem to be very interested in things like deployment time or deployment frequency or recovery time. So it was obvious the majority of work that was happening in IT was not visible, and nor was the visibility of the chaos of issue walk-ups, emails, phone calls, the context switching that was happening. None of this was visible and was probably also contributing to these queues of tickets. So the perception around the tickets was playing into the politics of IT is not responsive. So Reshma, being aware of lots of different techniques to address, was aware of a lot of different techniques to address these problems at Initech. And she was definitely being seen as one of the leaders who was going to bring in all of this DevOps thinking and shift left mentality and all of these kind of things. But she also knew that this was going to take some time. And really, she felt that if she didn't make an impact really quick, she may not be given enough time to move Intech toward flow. So it was clear there was a lot of expectation, there was a lot of pressure for some improvement, and that to make some improvement right away. And there was one area where Reshma thought maybe I can start to alleviate some pain quickly. Reshma had, in her thinking and reviewing some of the DevOps webinars and some of the things promoted by Gene Kim and Damon Edwards, especially around self-service and Toil. Toil exists in every environment to some degree. And being able to turn some of that Toil into self-service, she knew was something that she could do right away, that this was something that didn't necessarily have to wait for other techniques or other DevOps practices before she could get started. She could attack Toil right away. This would also perhaps free up some of her team's time to spend more time on things that really matter and that were not Toil, if she could start to kind of chip away at this. And this might be able to give her a quick win. At Initech, Toil was not a thing. There wasn't really data being tracked in this digital dashboard that pointed out what Toil was. It wasn't something that was very familiar to the folks there. It had been there for years. And in fact, it was really considered to be kind of part of the job. There was a Toil badge of honor, if you will, that if I can look super busy and I'm running from cube to cube and all of this kind of thing, then I'm busy, and that's just kind of the way the culture was there.
Yeah, heroics and busy work. That's how you'll get promoted. You almost die. Be sure you're almost near death.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Maybe a blood transfusion keeps you going. So for our listening audience, let's just review real quick what Toil is. Toil includes manually doing things. It can even be manually running an automation script, but it requires that there's a manual step there. There's some hands-on time that a human is going to have to spend doing that. It is repetitive. If you're performing a task for the first or second time, that's probably not Toil. But by the third or the fourth or ad nauseum after that, yes, it's probably toil. It's definitely automatable. If a machine could accomplish the task just as well as a human, or the need for the task could be designed away, that task is toil. It's tactical in that it is interrupt driven, it's reactive, it's not strategic or proactive. So handling paper alert or pager alerts or responding to emails or responding to these walk-ups could definitely be toil. And as more importantly, there's no enduring value. So if your service is in the same state after you've touched it, that's probably toil. If the task that you perform produced a permanent improvement to your service or to the environment, then that probably wasn't toil. So in looking at the toil, Reshma decided to get with her team and talk about toil, talk about self-service, and see if they could kind of find some low-hanging fruit that they could attack first. So they went through tickets from the last year and current open tickets and started looking for patterns, started looking for things that seemed to have long wait times. They decided that they would pick 3, just to have 3 that they could go with, that they could kind of promote as, here's something new that we're going to be doing in the name of DevOps and in the name of shift left and self-service. They were going to automate these 3 tasks, these 3 examples of toil, provide them as self-service jobs. They wanted the ticket creation to be automated with this because everything at Initech was being driven by tickets. They had a ticket-driven culture, if you will. Everything had to be through a ticket so that they could track it and for these SLAs. So this was, again, kind of ingrained in, this politics of these ticketing systems was very much ingrained with how they work day to day. They actually wanted to make sure that the tasks that they picked were not going to be limited by security. They had some PCI compliance. They had different things around security and auditing that just for, this kind of first step, they kind of wanted to avoid. They would address that later as if they could build some momentum around this idea. And they were very particular about making sure that the metrics around the tasks that they picked would be very evident on this digital dashboard. They wanted to be able to eliminate the wait time for those and compare and contrast these self-service jobs versus the other things that they had picked. So as they began to look through these, they were categorizing all of these different types of jobs. And I may have screwed up my automation here because we had this nice scrolling list, but it was a very long list of opportunities of different types of toil that they could pick. And it came from different service requests from not only the business, but also internal IT. They had started a big data effort years ago, and so there were lots of requests between the big data scientists and the DBAs. There were lots of reports that would take days to pull data from various systems and change and manipulate some of that data so that it could be presented back to sales and marketing and different groups within the business for them to use and to import into their systems. So there was lots of opportunities where there were manual handoffs between automated steps that they could turn into a workflow and try to automate those things end to end.
Well, there's something interesting about this list too, Tracy. And if anybody listening, I mean, look at this list. Look at these things. Are these wild, cancer-curing, complicated things that are on this list? No, they're not. And what happens is, are these things that they have in that you have in common on your list? Bring your list back. Oh, look at that! Now it's scrolling. Now I have to read it really quickly. So on this list are things that look like they're very simple. They're really good examples of toil, right? These are things that really ought to be automated, but they're not. And what's happening here is when, let's say I'm somebody who needs any one of these things on the list, I have to open a ticket. Let's pretend Tracy's on the end of the line. I'm opening a ticket, and what happens is, at a minimum, I have to wait for Tracy. And he's at the other end of the ticket because Tracy's much smarter than me and he's much more expensive and he's probably doing things that are more relevant to the business. But when he gets the ticket from me and I'm going, TikTok, please hurry up, Tracy has to stop what he's doing. He has to stop important work for the business. I assume it's important work for the business. and context switch. So it's not just him stopping down. I mean, you guys have heard that concept of context switching to the human brain. When Tracy has to stop and do something like reboot a service, because I'm not allowed to reboot services because of some, I either don't have access to the system, it's a security problem, I'm too stupid to reboot things. There's all sorts of rules around that. I'm waiting. Tracy's stopping and context switching. This is toil on the company. But the point I'm trying to make here is these are simple things that we shouldn't be escalating to other people to do. And that's usually what a ticket is. It's an escalation to somebody else. It's a throwing over the wall and waiting. And these are things that you shouldn't make people wait for. And yet we do.
Great points. Great points, Jordan. So they picked those 3, they automated them, they offered them as self-service, and the next meeting happened, and there was a big recognition of the improvement that was made. In fact, the biggest feedback that they had was, we want more. Like I said, there were numerous managers that were attending these meetings, and so the tickets didn't necessarily provide self-service to all of them or all to these business groups. It was to a select couple, and when they got those, the feedback was, this is fantastic. Are you going to continue doing more of this? Can you do some of this for my team? So immediately they were beginning to get that, okay, this is a good thing. And this was something immediate that everybody had some tangible results about and wanted some of that self-service themselves. So they were getting new requests. They were also getting requests for, well, can you add notifications for this? Can you have it send me an email at this? Or can you have it shout into our Slack channel? So there were very, additional, not just can you do it for me, but can it also do this for us? And so from the business side, there was an immediate need. From the operations side, they began to immediately select, okay, this is a way we can decrease our ticket escalations, because now we're automatically opening and closing these tickets so that we can kind of show the metrics on that digital dashboard. They were going to meet all their SLAs for this self-service automation. There was going to be more time to automate for this self-service automation, and the business would support that and would even support, it's okay if you're going to be a little bit slow on some of these requests if you're turning it into self-service jobs. Reshma got lots of kudos from the director of the business, particularly the ones that were vocal. They felt like this was a very tangible, visible step forward, and there was a positive step forward. And this also gave credibility to Reshma to begin to talk about some of the other techniques that would take a little bit longer, that would involve the culture changes, that were going to require some a little bit longer planning and buy-in from these groups as they begin this DevOps journey, and as they begin doing some restructuring around organization and all of these different tactics. So this really became kind of the stepping stool, the bootstrap, if you will, to moving toward DevOps. And of course, it also gave them a need to start to look at something like Rundeck to help orchestrate and manage and give kind of a service portal to all of these different jobs, a place where everybody could go to, everybody could become familiar with an intuitive user interface that would allow them to run that specific job. Rundeck also gave them the ability to start to handle some of those security concerns that they were avoiding when they were bootstrapping all of this, because Rundeck provided that barrier for the security, kind of that way of running privileged jobs and privileged environments by non-privileged users, and had all the guardrails and all the auditing and all of that kind of stuff. So was this the end? No, because Toil exists everywhere, and it always exists. There are always cost benefits around, are you going to try to automate 100% of your Toil? Probably not. But especially in environments that are just beginning to make that shift left DevOps mentality, there's certainly a lot of opportunity to not only improve the processes and improve the way you're kind of going about offering self-service, but also give yourself some credibility to begin to work toward that those DevOps objectives. And certainly Rundeck as an automation orchestration platform that can do complex workflows, Rundeck certainly serves as one of those tools to making that happen. Any thoughts or questions? Jordan, any other comments?
No, I think you made a really good point about her story and about what you went through, because listening to, you know, pundits and reality out there in the world, it's a good story about pursuing what self-service can actually do for you. And it was a great example of showing that there's that wait time that we take up. I mean, even if it takes you, if again, back in my example, Tracy, if I'm opening a ticket to you to do something for me, whether it's a server restart or adding capacity, some storage or something, even if you have automation that you use on the other end, when you finally get to my ticket and it takes you 5 minutes to do the task or half an hour or 5 seconds, I may have waited an hour or 4 hours or a day for you to do that mundane thing for me. And that time is what gets compressed when people start doing self-service inside of their organization. And that the other nice part about it is, and I think you mentioned in your presentation, that they went picking at things where they didn't think that security was going to be that big of an issue, because they were sort of terrified of the security model. And I remember that, and one of the reasons I'm bringing up is somebody has just put into the QA, how do I do self-service when I am under the pressure of security and of compliance? Good question. Comments on that? Where, you know, compliance is leaning down on you. We've seen this before. People are like, oh, I could never do this because insert acronym here. What do you think?
Well, first, get them involved early, especially in our.
You mean your auditing department, your security?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Bring them in early. Make them part of those conversations early, because, for example, we actually have a lot of security professionals, CSOs, who will reach out to Rundeck because Rundeck has a lot of that security built in. We become another layer. Layers of security is something that security professionals like to hear. They like layers of security. And so adding another layer of security that kind of can put those guardrails around specific jobs, as well as provide all of the auditing that they're looking for of who did it, where did they do it, what was affected, when was it affected, all of those things, all of those data elements that they're looking for that prove that, yes, we're maintaining our security posture. That is something that they want to see early and often. So Rundeck, we are happy to engage those folks, and we do. If they don't engage us first, if it's an environment where there is a security concern or a security priority, I should say, which probably includes all of them, but varying degrees of need there, we will absolutely ask to pull those people in to say, hey, this is how it works. Here's how it adds to your security, gives you more visibility, gives you more visibility to do those audits and kind of collect that information, and that usually kind of solves that concern, if not makes them an advocate for a tool like Rundeck.
Okay, so here's what I'll put you on the spot. Here's what I think you just said. When people come and say, "Oh my God, doing self-service, especially all of the things that Rundeck can do, is going to scare my security department or make them angry," I just heard you say the opposite is true, that security departments and auditing compliance departments embrace Rundeck, that they're saying, okay. I'm glad the answer was yes.
Exactly.
Any more questions from the field? I know we've allowed you the ability to speak if you'd like to speak. So go ahead and manually untoggle that mute button. If you're looking in your Zoom window, that's down on the lower left. Which way is my hand pointing? It's down on the lower left hand side of your screen with the little icon. So feel free to come off mute, or like I said in the chat, if you are like most human beings and you hate the sound of your own voice, you're welcome to also type things in the QA panel, or put them in the chat. We've got all those windows open and we're ready. Not only with Tracy and myself, but some other SMEs on the line to take questions about what you just saw, or really any Rundeck questions.
So, Jordan, I have a question. It all sounds wonderful. If I am like on day one of looking at self-service, what's the first thing that I should do? Like, if I'm saying like, I want to pick a project, I really want to jump into this, kind of what are the criteria for selecting that project? I know we looked at the list and some of the things, but
I think it's a good
kind of
question,
an
Don, and it
a
bears,
1, 2, 3.
yeah, and I think it bears repeating, because we have a lot of, it isn't just that it's really it's our opinion based on observations and actually feedback from the entire Rundeck community. We've got a very strong 50,000 plus strong Rundeck community out there, really, and they come and tell us stories about what they're excited about. And those are things that you'd think when you hear it. Almost much like that list we saw, we're like, well, that sounds like something simple. Like, yes, but it's a little yippy barking dog thing that's happening over and over again. Where, for example, I might have, like server restarts. I may have, we have an example that we show, and we heard a story about some company where there was the code on their website had a problem, and they were, the web developers were going to fix that code any day now. But in the interim, when users called on the phone and said, hey, it's broken or it's slow, the solution was to restart all of the web servers in sequence. And what this company was doing is what everybody else does. They open a ticket. If it's the weekend, it needs to get escalated to somebody who's on call, and somebody will put Tracy back in the hotspot. He's got to, log in and do, hit the restart against just Apache, right? We're not rebooting all the servers. We're going to restart the web services, bring it back up, or restart the database. Something that's well understood, again, should have been automated. And so what they did is created Rundeck jobs that allowed the web developers to reboot the web servers in either particular applications or particular projects or across the whole organization. And all the security guardrails and the auditing were in place. And so instead of opening a ticket, they went to Rundeck, they issued here's the web servers I want to restart. And all of that was written at the back end, written by somebody like Tracy. So the code was there. So it went server by server, rebooted it, put it back into the load balancer, made sure the ticket was there, and got it done. And so the web developers got immediate feedback. The customers got immediate feedback and got immediate resolution. And again, tickets weren't being waited on, tickets weren't being escalated. So I think the moral of my story is find some of those things that are seemingly simple. And just like the story that Tracy told, you'll suddenly go, oh, that was wonderful. We're no longer waiting for that. And that toil gets reduced in your environment. And now you have time to make tomorrow better than today.
And
Well, I just want to add
Yeah.
that was great, Jordan. Everybody, like we were saying, every environment is unique, and the politics in every environment is unique. So if you're looking to kind of spread the evangelism of what DevOps is and flow and delivering business value, your environment is also going to be unique about what those pains are. What is it that the business is kind of focused on? The politics of your environment. So that was a big piece of understanding the environment, talking to your business owners, talking to your managers, understanding what they feel the pain is, and if you were to solve certain pieces of pain for them, and there's the impact that would make on their attitude and their feelings about the responsiveness of your operations group. The other point I would make is, because every operations group has different customers, different layers of customers. Sometimes it's developers, sometimes it's external business groups. So your impact can go several layers deep, right? You might offer self-service to developers, but you might not offer certain things that are maybe too technical for someone on the business side within sales or marketing or accounting or another group. So being able to understand the impact and where those impacts are being felt, and where you can remove some of that toil and some of that pain and some of that waiting, and understanding the impact and politically how that may gain you some of that credibility should certainly be ingredients into your decision of what do we pick that to kind of get started, to show what this could possibly do, and start to move that large rock forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now I should come off mute. So speaking of getting started, it's like, well, how do I literally get started? How can I get Rundeck in my environment? Can I proof of concept it? How do I learn about Rundeck features? I'm going to paste something right into the chat. It's a link to our test drive with Rundeck. And what we've done is, if you go there, we'll build a dedicated environment just for you. That's Rundeck Enterprise, latest version installed. And what's nice is it is a self-guided tour that has a couple of example projects inside of there. There are examples of some real businesses. We've got a little, there it is right there. We've got a little Rundeck who will walk you through, show you what these projects are about, give examples, understand, hey, here's why we built the ACLs, why it works for this business. Here's a kind of job that this company may run, how to use the scheduling features, how to run some jobs ad hoc, and maybe how to even use some of the ad hoc features to allow people to do things inside of the environment, but put that security plane in there. It's a really great way to understand Rundeck with a real hands-on trial, and you're not trying to find space in your environment or asking for a container or some VMs inside of your own production environment. We're providing that infrastructure for you. We'll walk you through it, and we're happy to help you with that. Let me go back to the
Don, did we get any more questions?
No, I don't see any more. So if anyone out there does have anything they want to ask, and even if it's not specifically on this topic, feel free to jump in. While you have two Rundeck experts on the line, it might be interesting to some of the other folks on the line. So I'm not getting any.
Else, as I'm fond of saying, silence is compliance.
Everyone's already agreed that it's great. So I think in that case, if there are no more questions, if you guys are good, we can give everybody back 25 minutes of their day. And I would just say, we will, if you are planning to go to SRECon in New York in a couple weeks, we will be there. So please stop by and say hi. And stay tuned on our Rundeck blog. We'll be mailing, everyone who registered, we'll mail you a copy of this presentation. We'll also post it on our blog so that you can access it there. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one.